Hello, my name is Nicolas Cage, and I will be rewatching a few of my filmography's scenes. For A Dinosaur Skull in 2007, Nicolas Cage outbid Leonardo DiCaprio. He had a private island, 2 castles, and a $150,000 pet octopus. Then came the hammer-like real estate crash. The IRS put liens on everything he owned in a few months. His $150 million net worth fell to zero. He took up parts in 29 consecutive video movies out of desperation to pay his debts. However, purchasing exotic creatures or castles was not his biggest error. It was entrusting his riches to the wrong person. He was almost permanently devastated by the betrayal. On January 7, 1964, Nicholas Kim Coppola was born in Long Beach, California, into a family where light and dark met. The genealogy was further complicated by the fact that his mother, Joy Vogelsong, was a dancer and choreographer with German and Polish ancestry, and his father, August Floyd Coppola, taught comparative literature. He had pure Italian ancestry on his father's side. His grandmother was the actress Italia Panino, and his grandfather was composer Carmine Coppola. Francis Ford Coppola became his uncle as a result. His aunt was Talia Shire, Jason Schwartzman, Sofia Coppola, and Roman Coppola. They were only his relatives. It appeared to be Hollywood royalty from the outside, but it was different inside the house. His mother was severely depressed and had schizophrenia, and that fact hung over his early years like a persistent shadow. He would thereafter claim that she experienced extended periods of forgetfulness. She started being institutionalized when he was only 6 years old. By the age of 12, her condition had caused the marriage to fall apart. She disappeared for years at a time while receiving electroshock treatment in mental facilities. He developed emotional detachment. Like a scientist, he examined her episodes. He handled things that way. He grew up in Long Beach with his father. Furthermore, Nicholas would further clarify that offspring of schizophrenics frequently developed into what he referred to as hyperfrenetics. They were high-ranking, overachievers, and extremely watchful. Charlie Chaplin was also one of them, he alleged. He experienced Hollywood for the first time at the age of 15, a bit of Ridgemont High's Fast Times. At a burger place, just one of Brad's anonymous friends. It backfired right away when they gave him credit as Nicolas Coppola. He was constantly being made fun of by the actors and crew with lines from Apocalypse Now. As a child, he was the only actual teenager on the set, and the grown-ups around him were quoting his uncle's films. His hours were reduced by child labor rules. The jokes are more profound. He'd had enough one day. Nicolas Cage was his new name. Inspired in part by the comic book hero Luke Cage, half by the avant-garde composer John Cage, he desired a fresh start. It was viewed as rebellion by the industry. Doors were closed by Francis Ford Coppola. Despite being rejected by casting agents, Cage persisted. He left Beverly Hills High School at the age of 17. He had had enough of waiting in classrooms. He desired the films. He also accepted a minimum pay job at the Fairfax Cinema. When the majority of his Fast Times scenes were deleted, he sold tickets. He was a popcorn vendor. In between shifts, he stood in the rear of the auditorium and gazed at the screen, wondering how he would get there. That's when cinema became everything, he added later. He brought pizzas, too. It was survival, but it wasn't glamorous. It was not the family name that saved him. It was a tryout. He was called in to read lines for Rumblefish performers who were auditioning. His uncle Francis directed the movie, but Cage received no credit. He got a little part. He also filmed Valley Girl, which was released first and was his true breakthrough. It was a small production that cost about $350,000 and was shot in 22 days. It brought in more than $17 million. In a Romeo and Juliet spin, he portrayed Randy, a punk rocker. At the director's suggestion, he cut his chest hair into a V shape. Veins burst as he yelled. He left a lasting impression. Only $5,000 was earned by the filmmaker. Cage developed a profession. He poured himself into the role back on Rumblefish. He altered his appearance and made a commitment to a unique voice, demeanor, and whatever else that gave the part a sense of life. Even if it was merely a supporting character, it made no difference. He had something to prove. Then the outsiders arrived. He desired to play Deli. For 2 weeks, he confined himself to a room and stared at a picture of Charles Bronson in an attempt to play the part. His uncle rejected him once more, offered Cage a minor role as a consolation prize, and gave the role to Matt Dillon. No, Cage responded. He had no use for handouts. Later, merely to be on set, he appeared in a background combat scene, without being given credit. He was again passed over by Francis, who offered the part to Andy Garcia when The Godfather Part 3 was being cast years later. That wound never healed. Under Francis Ford Coppola, he faced the Cotton Club once more in 1984. It was a chaotic movie. The spending plan grew to $58 million. 5 of the more than 30 script revisions were written in a single 48-hour period. However, the true darkness was removed from the screen. Roy Radin, one of the producers, was killed. A hitman shot him in the head and set it on fire with dynamite. It was requested by Karen Greenberger, a drug dealer. She feared being cut or losing her $50,000 doll. The Cotton Club murder trial is the name given to the case. At the age of 20, Cage was thrust into the heart of Hollywood's shadows. He created Birdie in the same year. He played a Vietnam veteran who was injured. He had 2 baby teeth extracted without anesthesia to feel the anguish, bandaged his head for 5 weeks, slept in them, and lived in them. His skin was completely destroyed when he removed them. Ingrown hairs and acne, but the camera captured something genuine. Although it didn't earn much money, Birdie was awarded the Cannes Grand Jury Prize. Cage shown that he would go to great lengths for a part. In Racing with the Moon, he wasn't going slow. Cage came of age in 1984 when he portrayed a crazy jock named Nicky opposite Sean Penn in a World War II setting. Penn's character once struck a wealthy child for almost striking them with a bowling ball. The guy's girlfriend's blood was washed up by Cage. Cage used a knife to cut himself for a different scenario, in order to feel the emotion. Although it was risky, directors began to notice his potential. He underwent yet another transformation in 1986 for the Canadian movie The Boy in Blue, which told the story of Ned Hanland, a 19th-century rowing champion. Cage trained like a true athlete, learned how to row, and put on up to 30 pounds of muscle. Although the movie was a box office disaster, he was nominated for a Genie Award, which is Canada's Oscar equivalent. He made an impression even when he failed. Then came another Coppola movie, Peggy Sue Got Married. One more mess. The romantic lead, Charlie, was portrayed by Cage, who took the bold decision to give his character a peculiar nasal voice modeled after a clay horse named Pokey from The Gumby Show. Kathleen Turner, his co-star, was enraged. "Please stop him," she pleaded with Francis. Cage wore false teeth as well. Turner was a wretch. Francis couldn't afford to miss the deadline, so the crew worked 20 hours a day, 6 days a week. Even Francis subsequently admitted he regretted authorizing the act when the film was released because it was so odd. That was their final collaboration. Nicolas Cage participated in one of the most bizarre performances ever recorded on film in 1988. He portrayed Peter Lowe, a delusional literary agent on the verge of insanity, in Vampire's Kiss, convinced that he was becoming a vampire. In addition to acting weird, Cage consumed live cockroaches to make the madness come to life. 3, not just 1 or 2. To tease him, the director had him do a second take. Furthermore, bugs weren't even called for in the original script. Raw eggs were to be served. However, Cage pushed for something more horrifying after witnessing Ozzy Osbourne bite the head off a bat in 1982. Years later, in 2023, Cage declared he would never do it again and expressed his profound regret. Even though it was unsettling, that scene served as a springboard for what Cage subsequently referred to as his nouveau shamanic acting technique, a look characterized by strong physicality, loud outbursts, and wild eyes. Cage had already displayed a whole different side in Moonruck just a year before to the cockroach craziness. The picture, which was released in December 1987, had him and Cher in a humorous and heartbreaking Brooklyn romance. The movie won 3 Oscars, including Best Actress for Cher, Best Supporting Actress for Olympia Dukakis, and Best Original Screenplay for John Patrick Shanley. He played a hot-headed, one-handed baker who quickly wins over his brother's fiancée with unadulterated passion, and one memorable line, "Snap out of it." Cage was nominated as well, and the film did well at the box office, demonstrating that he was more than simply a strange guy. He had the ability to move people. 2 additional parts that couldn't have been more dissimilar followed in 1990. The first was Firebirds, a military action movie in which Cage portrayed U.S. Army helicopter pilot Jake Preston. Released on May 25, 1990, it was his first true action film and was shot with the assistance of more than 100 military men using actual Apache helicopters. Critics criticized the film as a helicopter-based Top Gun ripoff. and despite all the realism, it made just over $6 million in its first weekend. Cage persevered, demonstrating that he was as prepared to dive into explosions and cockpit drama as he had flung himself into devouring roaches. Cage's performance in David Lynch's Wild at Heart that same year took a completely different course. He portrayed Sailor Ripley, an Elvis-obsessed, snakeskin jacket-wearing lover who is escaping with Laura Dern. It was more than a costume jacket, it belonged to Cage. Before he discovered the ideal use for it, he kept it in his closet for a year after purchasing it from a secondhand store on Melrose. Sailors comment that the jacket represented his individuality, and confidence in personal freedom was included in the screenplay. Despite winning the Palme d'Or and having a 1990 Cannes premiere, the film's explicit sex and severe violence nonetheless caused 300 people to leave early test screenings. Despite barely earning $14 million in a $10 million budget, it had a big impact and provided Cage with an unapologetic part that allowed him to channel Elvis. Prior to all of that, however, Cage ventured far from the usual Hollywood route in 1989 with Time to Kill, a French-Italian war drama that took place during Italy's 1936 invasion of Ethiopia. With a team of European actors and a score by Ennio Morricone, Cage played a soldier fighting grief and remorse in a distant land in the Zimbabwean film. In sharp contrast to his American blockbusters, it was experimental and subdued. The movie had only a 5.0 rating from only 1099 votes on IMDb. Thus, it didn't make much of an impression. However, it demonstrated that Cage wasn't scared to take chances, even if it meant traveling outside of the nation and entering uncharted territory. Cage returned to the public eye in 1992 with Honeymoon in Vegas. In order to pay off the debt, he allowed the winner to spend a weekend with his girlfriend after he lost $65,000 in a rigged poker game. In his Elvis costume, Cage skydived onto the Las Vegas Strip as the film came to a close. However, the script did not include the extremely odd part. Cage's actual addiction to gambling was evident in the character's heavy gambling behind the scenes. The comedy was deemed pure fiction by director Andrew Bergman, but Cage's off-camera behavior gave it a darker tone. These binges demonstrated that his in-depth exploration of personalities occasionally had lingering effects, hinting at the enormous debts he would accrue in the 2000s. Then came the Oscar-winning role. Cage's departure from Las Vegas in 1995 placed him in the position of Ben Sanderson, a guy who, after losing everything, drinks himself to death. He got intoxicated, not just acted intoxicated. Cage did medical research, went to 12-step meetings, and drank actual alcohol while filming scenes. Cage was so drunk in one scene that he could hardly stand. According to director Mike Figgis, his personal life was destroyed by the realism, which got him Best Actor. In April 1995, he wed Patricia Arquette, but they divorced after only 9 months. Although they remained legally wed until 2001, the movie marked the end of their emotional union. He paid more for that role so unadulterated and strong than any salary could. In The Rock, a year later, Cage went from suffering to sheer exhilaration. Despite having a $75 million budget, the 1996 release brought in $335 million worldwide, making it the 4th highest-grossing film of the year. Opposite Sean Connery, he portrayed FBI chemist Dr. Stanley Goodspeed. However, it was the stunts, not the acting, that gave the role its brutality. Through a set of simulated VX gas, a nerve toxin so lethal that even the phony version temporarily blinded him, Cage ran. Not all of his seizures and breathing issues in the movie were staged. Every symptom was matched to CDC records by the film's knowledgeable advisors, and the realism tested Cage's physical limits. Con Air followed in 1997. Cage changed into the long-haired Army Ranger Cameron Poe, who was stranded on a prison plane that had been taken over. It made 24 when it debuted on 2,824 screens on June 6, $1 million in its debut weekend, and went on to earn $224 million globally. It made $149 million in profit on a $75 million expenditure. Nothing was more famous than Cage's snarling, "Put the bunny back in the box." The line wasn't even in the script, but it was loud, violent, and full of memorable moments. It became a pop cultural sensation after he made it up on the spot. Tragic events did occur during the production, though. Stuntman Philip Schwartz was murdered on August 29, 1996, when a static mock-up of the plane fell on him during the crash landing scene in Las Vegas. Someone lost their life to pay for the explosions, Cage and John Travolta switched roles in Face Off later that year, with Cage portraying both the villain and the hero. Advanced 3D face scans and frightfully lifelike robotic reproductions were needed for the surgical scenario. When Cage saw his own artificial doppelganger, he became so upset that the set had to be removed so he could gather his thoughts. The lifelike Cage had moving eyes, breathing bladders, and hair so finely detailed that it was like gazing into a post-mortal mirror. His skin was inflamed by the prosthesis, and the procedure was physically taxing. However, the movie became a huge smash, grossing $245 million globally, of which $112.2 million came from the US alone. It became one of Cage's holy trinity of action movies from the 1990s, along with The Rock and Con Air. In 2004, Nicolas Cage earned about $20 million for the $347 grossing movie National Treasure, $5 million globally. However, the narrative continued beyond the box office results. Something odd ignited inside him after that success. He developed a real-world treasure obsession. In 2007, he outbid Leonardo DiCaprio for $276,000. The purchase was for a 67-million-year-old dinosaur skull. He was unaware that Mongolia had seized it. He returned it when the police arrived. No apologies, no refund, just gone. He paid $345 million for the Lowry House in New Orleans the same year. Ghost stories, blood, and torture were all well known in the house. DeLine Lowry, a notorious serial killer, once owned it. When his finances collapsed 2 years later, in November 2009, the home was sold at auction for $5.5 million. The enigma was turning against him because he had pursued it too much. Cage established Saturn Films, his own production company, back in 1995. He wanted to share tales that were significant to him. His first and only picture as a director, Sonny, turned that dream into a nightmare. The movie, which cost $4 million to make, came out in 2002. It only played in 6 cinemas for 1 week, and only grossed 179s. That represented a financial loss of 99.6%. It was destroyed by the criticism. They said he was spinning a story he didn't understand. When you factor in the promotion, he lost around $5 million. After that, the focus of Saturn movies shifted from vision to survival. Any role that paid the bills was what he utilized it for. Then, in 2007 came Ghost Rider. Although it brought in $228.7 million worldwide, the backstage expenses were severe. To build the Blazing Skull, Cage underwent a rigorous 3D XRAY scanning procedure. For hours, he had to remain motionless, as sensors mapped his cranium. The crew adjusted the fire effects frame, each frame using Maya and Houdini. During filming, Cage rode a Buell and a bespoke helicopter named Grace. Sweat-soaked and wearing bulky motorbike gear, the shooting days lasted 12 hours. He was worn out already. He reconsidered action roles after that shoot. At $110 million, the budget was enormous for the period. Cage, however, left everything on the set. He began to experience more emotional distress in 2006. He portrayed real-life 9/11 officer John McLachlan, who was among the men buried beneath the debris. In the World Trade Center, Cage spent hours immersed in a sensory deprivation tank in order to enter the Headspace realm. He went to the ground zero. He spoke with survivors. His panic attacks began. As his mental state faltered, the shooting had to be repeatedly stopped. The late completion of the $65 million movie, which ended in early 2006, brought in $163.2 million. However, Cage left feeling emotionally exhausted and unsettled. It would be years before he touched a film like that again. Superman had always been his favorite character. In 1997, he paid about $110,000 for Action Comics #1, the 1938 issue that featured Superman's debut. Then, in 2000, it was taken from his house. He never forgot that he had received the insurance money. It was discovered in a San Fernando Valley storage container in 2011. Cage sold it for $261,000 at auction that November. There was nothing he could do. He was in dire straits, and the IRS demanded $6.2 million from him. Over 14 years, it yielded a 12.64% return. However, the cash wasn't happiness. It served as a lifeline. He gave his son the Kryptonian name of Superman, Kal, around the same time. At one point, he was even considered for a Superman film. Between 2008 and 2009, that hope, like many others, faded. Everything fell apart. Cage owned 15 homes valued at more than $33 million. He had castles, Schloss in Germany and Midford Castle in England for $6.3 million. He owned a private island, many Lamborghinis, the haunted Lorry Mansion, and a $150,000 dinosaur skull. Then came the crash in real estate. His kingdom fell apart. His homes have $13 million in debts from the IRS. He had back taxes of $14 million. He made $8 million from the sale of his comic book collection to make ends meet. Samuel Levin, his business manager, was held accountable for driving him into financial despair. Cage sued him for $20 million in October 2009, but the harm was already done. Rather than going bankrupt, Cage became a one-man filmmaking powerhouse. He made 29 direct-to-video appearances between 2010 and 2015. His reputation suffered, but he persisted. He needed money quickly. He told GQ, "I have the IRS and all these creditors." He claimed he never staged a performance. "And I'm spending $20,000 a month trying to keep my mother out of a mental institution." He landed parts in Season of the Witch, Stolen, Rage, and other movies, each of which paid between $1 and $3 million over time, earning him nearly $100 million. In Drive Angry, Cage performed most of the stunts himself, and in one shootout scene, he drove at almost 100 Mypurid Beach, while actresses clung to the car hood. By February 2012, it had paid off, and he paid $6.2 million to the IRS and cleared the 2007 debt. Some of those films almost killed him. He insisted on using real Hellfire missile props, one of which exploded and sent a crew member to the hospital. He called it Zen mode. He studied dark Kama Sutra positions for his role, and once rode his motorcycle at 100 vbm/a Mari tour on the 405 freeway at 3:00 a.m. just to get into character. A real car explosion singed his eyebrows and temporarily deafened him. He subsequently acknowledged that it was indeed insane, but it continued. In 2013, he starred in the grim movie, The Frozen Ground, which was about an Alaskan serial murderer. Cage filmed scenes in real 20-degree temps, and Vanessa Hudgens recalled that she couldn't feel her toes. After studying actual police footage and training with Alaska troopers, Nicolas Cage met Christina Fulton in 1988. Their relationship lasted 3 turbulent years, and in 1990, Cage gave birth to his first son, Weston Coppola Cage, after he collapsed from hypothermia during a night shoot and had to be treated before he could finish. They ended in 1991, but they remained together through Weston, and things only grew rougher. It was turbulent from the beginning, and Fulton subsequently claimed that Cage sought to control her whereabouts, who she spoke to, and how she lived. In court, Fulton characterized Cage as possessive and jealous. She filed a lawsuit against Cage and Weston, who was 34 at the time, in 2025, claiming that despite knowing about Weston's lengthy battle with mental illness and assault charges, Cage never intervened when he became violent. Cage's next significant relationship, at least initially, seemed like a dream come true. He met Patricia Arquette in 1987 at Kainer's Deli in Los Angeles, when she was just 18. She made a dramatic comeback into his life years later, dressed entirely in black vinyl, carrying a huge purple wedding cake when she proposed. They were married in April 1995 on a Carmel cliff, wearing a leopard print jacket, and the ceremony lasted 10 minutes. Their marriage lasted 6 years, but they split up after just 9 months. Cage missed significant family gatherings for reshoots, and she was left alone while he filmed Con Air. Her mother was dying of cancer, and they weren't even living together. Arquette claimed that the fighting never stopped, and in 2001 it was officially over. But then Alice Kim arrived. Cage was 40 years old. Cage had always loved comic books, and this marriage would become his longest, lasting 12 years. But it wasn't peaceful. She was a 19-year-old Korean-American waitress in Los Angeles, and they met in 2004. They married in Las Vegas the same year, and their age difference was 21 years. They talked, and in 2005, they had a son, whom they named Cal, Superman's given name. Cage's next marriage didn't even last a week. He married Erica Quake in Vegas on March 23, 2019. 4 days later, on March 27, he filed for annulment. Cage was arrested in New Orleans in 2011 after he grabbed Alice's arm and struck parked cars while intoxicated. Rumors circulated that he had cheated while filming, and by January 2016 they had split up. By June it was public knowledge. Surveillance footage showed them fighting at the courthouse, to which Cage slurred, "I'm not doing it," Koke responded. "I never asked you to." He claimed he was too inebriated to know what he was doing, and he also said she concealed a criminal past and another relationship. The couple had been dating since 2018 but remained under the radar. In 2011, his custody battle over Weston brought even stranger aspects of Cage's life to light, including the $150,000 she paid for a pet octopus he claimed helped him act, and the $276 he spent on two albino king cobras, Moby and Sheba. She demanded a payout, claiming the press had damaged her reputation. The divorce was finalized on May 30. Honest. In court, Patricia Arquette brought up the fact that Weston owned a saltwater shark and a crocodile, that he used to drink wine while staring at them, and that it felt like they were planning to kill him, and that he carried anti-venom just in case. Eventually, neighbors threatened to sue him, so he gave them away in 2008. Despite having a certificate of authenticity and serrated teeth, he paid $276 for a 32-inch Tyrannosaurus bataar skull at an auction in 2007. Better than Leonardo DiCaprio. But Homeland Security informed him in 2014 that the fossil had been stolen from Mongolia's Gobi Desert by a man who had been smuggling fossils for years. Cage returned it in 2015 and was not prosecuted, but he lost all the money. Director Werner Herzog was concerned about Cage's performance during the 2009 filming of Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans, believing that he had used cocaine. In reality, Cage had used saccharine to simulate the look, but oddly, an Australian doctor had used real cocaine to treat his sinus infection, which allowed him to examine how it affected movement. To keep up, Cage took on more film roles than ever before, appearing in or producing 11 films between 2008 and 2011. His tax issues nearly destroyed him. He paid $657.05 in 2012 to settle a 2007 tax lien, but that was only part of it. He admitted he owed the IRS about $14 million in total, blaming his business manager, who claimed he had warned him since 2005. He never went bankrupt, but he had to sell 15 properties, including castles and a private island, as well as his comic book collection and rare things like a two-headed snake. Pig, a $3 million independent film that started his return in 2021, was a game-changer. Despite earning barely $4.5 million in theaters, the picture, which starred Cage as a quiet truffle hunter searching for his stolen pig, received a 97% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and became the 9th most watched movie on Prime Video by October 2025. Even Quentin Tarantino praised him for it, and it earned him an Independent Spirit Award and his first Critics' Choice nomination since leaving Las Vegas. By 2025, Cage had recovered, and his net worth had reached $40 million, with his highest value being $150 million, earning $20 million per film. He is now debt-free since 2023, and he owns a $10.5 million home in Malibu. He no longer purchases islands or octopuses. In 2021, he portrayed a criminal in a surreal samurai dystopian world in Prisoners of the Ghostland, directed by Seon Sono, and held at Sundance for 103 minutes, fusing Japanese aesthetics with westerns. Reviews were mixed, but praised the visuals and Cage's wild performance. At the time, Cage was collecting Japanese manga and art. His millions-dollar action comics, #1 copy, was stolen back in 2000, and more than 10 years later, it was discovered in an abandoned locker. Like his career, the comic book had been lost but not forgotten.